Martin.
Hi, nice.
Nice to meet you, Martin.
Nice to meet you.
Martin, as a ISHI Student Ambassador, how has that been going for you?
It's been really such a great opportunity and experience so far. This is my first ISHI, and so being able to see it not only as a participant, but also as a participant with a little bit extra to it has been such a great experience so far.
That's great. Like, what kind of extra special things have you gotten to do?
Yeah, so part of the pre-work before the conference itself included taking over the ISHI Instagram page and showing a day in my life as a student worker in a forensic laboratory, as well as doing some interviews both about me and how I got interested in forensic science, as well as more in-depth research about my poster.
That's spectacular. Now, before we get into your poster, how did you decide to get into forensics?
Yeah, so I think I can really pinpoint it back to one particular summer enrichment camp I did back in 6th grade, where we did some really basic matching of fingerprints or footwear impressions, and so that really just stuck with me. And even looking back on it, it all makes sense. Like, my favorite cartoon growing up was Scooby-Doo, and so it totally makes sense looking back on my childhood.
Cracking the cases.
Oh, of course. I was 6 years old being like, it's that guy.
I bet you were pretty good at it.
You know, I'd like to think I am, but I'm still a novice.
Well, now that has brought you all the way to here.
Yes.
What have you been studying, and tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I am a second-year master's student studying forensic biology at Virginia Commonwealth University. And so my research in particular is focused on the East Marshall Street well, which was a well that was uncovered back in the 1990s during the construction of a college building on the medical campus in downtown Richmond. They uncovered this well, and in that well was a massive comminglage of human remains, 500 and over 500. And so previous work from former master students in the same lab were focused on nuclear DNA and reassociating these individuals back into discrete individuals. And so the Smithsonian had reported that these remains were largely of African ancestry, and there were about 9 juveniles within the well. And from the former master students' work, they were only able to reassociate 1 juvenile, so the information that we had about these juveniles was very minimal. And so that's where my project comes into play, trying to really get the life history from these 8 other juveniles.
And what kind of information did you discover?
Yeah, so we used mitochondrial DNA and SNPs through NGS to try and get the ancestry. So what we have from both the mito and the SNP is an agreement with the reports from the Smithsonian that these remains are largely African ancestry. So once we got the mitochondrial haplogroups, we would put these into MPOP, and what we found were they were mostly clustering towards West Central Africa, modern-day Cameroon, and Nigeria. And so we also see that these remains are of African ancestry through the SNP-based information, where these 3 bones here are clustering really strongly towards the African ancestry, and then we've got one here where, upon further analysis, was still mainly African ancestry, but also had a considerable portion of Native American ancestry. And so beyond the ancestry, we were able to also potentially reassociate 2 juveniles into discrete individuals. So how we did that was we would take the bones that had very similar haplotypes, and we would take them to our forensic anthropologist, and she would assess whether or not they were anthropologically concordant with one another. And so that's how we were able to associate 2 individuals together.
So with all this great information that you've found, I mean, you probably had to learn a lot of new techniques. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so heading into my graduate program, I had never worked with mitochondrial DNA. I had never done an NGS run, and so those were techniques and procedures that I had to become really acquainted with, especially mito. It's so very sensitive and prone to contamination that I had to be extremely careful when working with these samples.
So Martin, with all this great work that you've done in the university, where do you feel like you're going to end up in the future?
Yeah, so I've always been pretty open-minded, and I continue to be open-minded heading into the last semester and a half of my program. I have a preference towards being a DNA analyst, whether that's in a public or a private lab, that I'm fine with, but I've always said I'll go where the opportunities take me, and so far the opportunities have taken me to Denver for AFS or San Antonio for ISHI. So far that mentality has really been leading me in the right places.
That's spectacular. Thank you so much for chatting with me, Martin.
Of course.
Have a great time.
Thank you.